Awesome. So we'll begin this panel on APIs and cloud, but we also want this panel to be an inclusive discussion where a good number of people to have an open discussion. So sometimes I will be the moderator. And so if you have any question, we will let one of the panelists finish and we will try to take it and include that in the program, right? So don't hesitate. The panelists are great thinkers, technologists, and they're here for the audience, right? So you are the main focus on this panel, right? So I will let everybody to introduce themselves. Just for me, I'm the founder of API Days conference. It's the main conference about APIs and cloud and technology, either for the business side or the technical side. We do 9 events a year with 2 events dedicated to banking, right? So this is why the Istanbul Fintech team asked me to moderate, right? But what I will propose is that we make a first round of introductions, so you know what everybody is doing, and then we will begin the discussion.
Okay, so my name is Will Burton. I am the Managing Director of EcoSpend Technologies. We're an open banking solution provider in that we have actually what's called an end-to-end open banking solution. So from the bank core system right the way through to the front-end application that a customer would use to manage their money by way of also a payment gateway. So we've built every single piece of the journey. Platform's currently linked to 28 banks with 7 more under progress. And that's pure open banking connection. We don't screen scrape. And that's who we are and what we do. Okay. Based in London.
Okay. Ömer Uyar. I'm the CEO of Intertech. Intertech is a 30 years old company, and we are serving solutions under 10 countries and to 50 customers. And it's an end-to-end banking platform, including the CRM, BPM, core, and the payment solution, and BI, and the digital channels as well. And I think we are running also API platforms for our banks.
Hi everyone, I'm Mike. I'm the co-founder of Hydrogen. That's me on the top right on the pictures there. So we're based in New York. Our platform we sell globally. You could think of us like a financial operating system. So the same way you use iOS or Windows or other operating systems, you have applications built on top. We allow startups, scale-ups, or enterprises to actually build end applications from investing, insurance, savings to wellness, and soon credit and lending. And we're looking for more potential clients and reselling channel partners here in Turkey and the greater region.
Okay.
Fuad, please.
My name is Fuad Husseini. I'm the founder of the Open Insurance Initiative. I'm really the chief storyteller for the initiative. So we're trying to promote open APIs in the insurance industry and data sharing. It's an industry-driven initiative. It's not driven by regulators. And we're supported by a growing community. We now have just over 20 companies collaborating and contributing to the initiative. And they include 4 major European insurers.
Yeah. Thank you, Fuad. And please, Burak.
Hello everyone, welcome. My name is Burak Kuzucu. I am working for Oracle Turkey. I'm based in Turkey, and with the title of Sales and Business Development Executive. In addition to these roles, I am helping to develop Oracle's Fintech ecosystem in Turkey as well. In addition to these activities, I am giving a lecture in university on technology and innovation management. And you know Oracle. I don't want to talk about Oracle, but you will be hearing some news about the transformation of Oracle with the ecosystem mindset. That is all from my side now.
Yeah, thank you. So during this panel, we'll talk about a few topics. How APIs became a main topic in the open fintech and world. We will also talk about let's say what's the impact on the business, what's the impact on IT. What's the impact on regulations? You know, many regulations are tackling the thing, and how new solutions are currently providing new opportunities to be based on that, right? Just as I said, I want it to be more interactive. Either specific topics that you want to be covered, so it can be included in the question or the answer from the panel. Do you have any topics, keywords? We'll talk a little bit about ledgers, share ledgers, blockchains a little bit. Is there any topic? Yeah.
Yeah, insurers sharing their APIs with fintechs or insurtechs that are aggregating the solutions to the customers.
Yeah. So insurers sharing APIs. We have some
Yeah,
and
the
others.
ecosystem.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
think
Your
about that.
topic.
So it's perfect. Yeah.
DAG as a form of distributed ledger.
Yeah. Okay. So DAG, and we'll talk about distributed ledgers a little bit too. Is there any other topics so we don't miss it? Again, you will be able to ask questions.
API management platforms and their usage.
Yeah.
Okay.
API management.
Yeah, I can provide some information about that.
Yeah.
Maybe also consumer finance.
Consumer finance. Okay, a lot of topics. Great. So you know these. So DAG, distributed applications, insurance, consumer applications. No, consumer finance. Right? Consumer finance, and the other one was API management.
Yeah,
API management.
Okay.
So what a program, right?
Well, I guess we start at the beginning, shouldn't we? And think about why do we have APIs? What are they doing? What on earth are they? And actually, Mike and I were having a really interesting chat before. People bang on about APIs like it's some sort of holy grail. And effectively, it's just a door. If there's nothing on one side or the other, they are effectively pointless. But what we're really talking about here is data. The gentleman here was talking about insurers and banks, obviously, because that's where we sit in looking at banking data. There is now a wealth of data out there. Some companies know what to do with it, others don't have it. But we're looking towards building technology ecosystems that allow companies to articulate value from that data. And an API is a very good way to do it, and it's a secure way to do it. And I think that's why companies are looking to develop them. So that's why we're talking about, and I think banking's sort of been the first wave of that idea, and it comes into consumer finance and how we can deliver value to customers that banks hitherto haven't been able to, because much of their time is spent effectively keeping the lights on. Fintechs can come in and provide a really good front end to a specific user community, and the bank can give them that doorway in order to do it. And then linking into API management, it's about keeping things stable and allowing for that data flow to happen, which is obviously critical, because if it goes down, then it undermines the whole concept of data sharing, and then you've got regulation and GDPR.
So thank you for that. And you, Omer, in what manner APIs brought you in the building Intertech in the Inter API?
I think we can start from this. Why do we need the APIs again? I think it's much more about the accessibility, because there are a lot of non-bank customers, maybe in US, maybe in Western Europe. There are a lot of people, they are bank customers, but in some emerging countries, there are non-bank customers, a lot of. And they are spending time on the portals, they are spending time on the, some portals or e-commerce sites, etc. But they are non-bank and they cannot do spending. But if you enable them, and if you let them to become customers, and if you let them to have some banking functions, services, then you make the people to run this portal much more efficiently, much more spending. So in Intertech, in order to empower the people, empower the fintechs as well, we were a traditional company developing software and developing solutions for, as I told, the core banking, the credit cards, the business process management. And for the last 2 years, we have developed the api.intertech.com.tr. When we look at in Turkey, we are just serving more than 16 customers, our banks. And within this API platform, you can immediately let them to be used by the banks. And we are providing more than 120 services, API call. And through that, we have also partners. Their logos and names are put onto the portal, and it's in use. And also, when we look at the richness of that platform, I can easily say that at the moment we are developing mobile banking applications as well, and they are totally running on this API platform. So we have a huge range of the API services that can enable a fintech, insurtech, whatever they call themselves, to immediately access these banks and access this banking services and meet their customers with the banks.
Yeah, thank you, Omer. You, Michael, why APIs are enabling you to build hydrogen?
Yeah, so I'll answer that, and I'll answer the point about consumer finance, I think, at the same time. So if you think about APIs, as we'll talk about a bunch of times, APIs really aren't a solution. And a lot of clients still don't understand that, who come to us or come to Oracle and other cloud providers, I'm sure. They come and say, give me your APIs, and magically it's going to create all these new businesses for them. So APIs just connect things together, and they think of it as a data project. You have to come with solutions first. So a consumer finance example, one of our clients is TD Bank. They have 25 million customers in North America. They offer banking, credit, lending, investing, etc. So the APIs just allow them to pull data from other banks, to talk to within the bank. Like their savings apps don't talk to their investing apps. It's a different app and it's different data. So that's really the power of APIs, is to persist data through there and then being able to give more customized recommendations. So you can imagine if you're a bank in Canada or you're a bank here or a Fintech, if you have 1 million customers going through an onboarding, you can now, with data, with APIs, provide 1 million different recommendations. Where if you don't have an API, you don't know anything about that customer. So you can't give consumer finance products because you don't know where they live, how much money they make, where they bank, anything about their goals. And now APIs allow you to do that. So that's most of the conversations we try to have with customers is if you're going to use APIs in these tech platforms, you need to have a solution first. What do you want to build? What customer problem? And then you use the APIs as data. And it's a big education gap in the market, I think.
Yeah, there is the author of a blog called platform.info, and actually he said APIs doesn't create opportunities, they just scale opportunities or integration and stuff like that. You need a business first, interaction first, to scale these interactions. APIs just enable you to have this in the self-service. And
facilitator.
Yeah, facilitator, yeah, so that's it. So for in the insurance business, how APIs came into the market and what's the opportunities behind them?
Well, as an initiative, we will not be developing technologies or creating software. We will become a standards making organization for APIs. So the Open Insurance Initiative has two key components. The first is the design of an open API standard. Now, open APIs allow companies to publicly expose data and functionality of various systems to third parties without necessarily having a business relationship with them. So we will design a best of all worlds API standard to allow data to flow securely between insurers, their customers, and third parties. It will be an API that is developed, driven, and maintained by the developer community for the international insurance sector. The second key component is sharing data. Now, there are two types of data involved. The first is open data, which is basically a set of data that's been aggregated and anonymized so that the identity of the data owner is hidden. The second type of data is personal data, and this is obviously something that will have to comply with data rules and regulations such as GDPR. So the main objectives of the Open Insurance Initiative is to empower the consumer to share his data. And we want to make it possible for ecosystems to develop. Ecosystems is now a very popular phrase in the financial services. Everybody seems to be speaking about it, but you see very little of it in practice. So we believe open APIs will actually accelerate the development of ecosystems, which will bring in services linked to the insurance products, so that insurance becomes part of the experience that customers go through. For instance, if they go to a bank to get a mortgage, that the platform of the bank could also include insurance products, or platforms of real estate agents could also include products related to, for instance, home and contents insurance. So the open insurance, let's say, environment will be integrated into other ecosystems as well.
Yeah. So it seems that sometimes I remember something talking about that, like insurance cannot be everywhere, but an API can be integrated anywhere where insurance needs to be.
Exactly.
When you buy a car, when you buy a house, when you buy
exactly.
something.
That's the ecosystem experience, where the customer journey seamlessly includes all kinds of different services. Okay, without the customer specifically asking for a specific service, it's all integrated into one service. For instance, if you go to a motor dealership in the future and you select a car, part of the selection of the car could also include the selection of your insurance policy and the coverage that you require.
Burak, to finish that part, how, with your point of view at Oracle, how did you see the API opportunity coming, and what does that change in terms of software delivery?
Once upon a time, APIs were some technical stuff and a bit boring. But from the business perspective, it's not anymore technical stuff, and it's the key of next generation business, for example. And I don't want to focus on just the finance and the insurance industry. I would like to extend and think about more beyond these industries. There are three drivers initiating the openness trend in the worldwide, and one is democratizing the data. Data is beholden on some corporations like Fintech, financial institutions, but beyond that, the peoples are just challenging the data holders, not banks, not only banks. I mean, for example, we are challenging Facebook, we are challenging Amazon.com. So we are just asking our own data, individuals are asking all data back. And that is the one trend for openness. The other one is the open innovation. Okay, some time ago, innovation is just was happening inside our organization, but with the term of open innovation perspective, it is just extending from internal boundaries to outside of the boundaries. That is the second trend. And the third is the collaboration and sharing economy. And here is how Oracle trying to change the game. Okay, once upon a time, we are trying to build our solutions and go to market by our own channels, but building your solution on your own, going to market on your own, alone, it's very, very tiring. It should be really focusing way, and you couldn't compete with your competitors on your own. So there is no competition head-to-head in future, There will be competition ecosystem. This trend is happening with the rising of cloud in the IT industry, because cloud is enabler of this transformation, all of them. Data democratization, open innovation, cloud is enabler for API as well. And here is the new story of Oracle begin. And I will talk in detail.
Thank you. In the second part. So after this first round, what APIs are enabling? So we talk a lot about opportunities, APIs and opportunities to deliver product, have more distribution channels, enter into the programmable economy, a lot of words like that. I have a question about this API trend, like building interfaces that are able to be delivered for all companies on all the markets. To your mind, are there more opportunities for startups, so the small player advantage, or an opportunity for big players, so the slow mover but strong mover advantage, right? So who has any take?
Well, I think it depends. The barrier to entry, certainly in the UK, is regulation, and looking across Europe, PSD2 is there. So as long as a small or a big company can get over that hurdle, then they're free to play in that sort of market. And I think it comes back, technology is always racing ahead of where people really are. So if we look at the ethics behind data sharing and we look at whether customers are comfortable with data sharing, these are the questions that regulators and governments are handling. I know Mark Zuckerberg said a couple of days ago about how Facebook needs to be potentially more regulated, and the US might look at GDPR and all these sorts of things. So it will come down to, quite simply, whether your company is 1 or 1 million, whether or not you can get over the regulatory hurdles. Now, we're lucky in the UK that the FCA has understood that, and I think, Fuad, you've had good conversations with the FCA. They have an innovation team there now that totals 40 people, which for a regulator is really unusual, and they are trying to help we were regulated in super quick time. The main concept of their regulation was to do with data security. So I think that's the only barrier. So I think small companies, as long as they can afford it and can actually do the paperwork, which is, if you think about it, is a good thing. So customers want to use products that they trust. And if you have regulation, I don't know if anyone's aware of the peer-to-peer lending in the UK. They spent years trying to get regulated because they couldn't convince customers to use the peer-to-peer lending platforms because they didn't trust them. So I think it's the only and the correct barrier to entry.
So an opportunity even for regulators to make the market more dynamic, is what you say?
Definitely, as long as regulators don't impede it. They must do their job, they must be independent, they must help companies through those sort of hurdles, as we call them. But that's the barrier to entry. It's not the technology, it's the regulation. But I don't see it as a bad thing, especially when we talk about sharing data, banking data, insurance data. This is the stuff that keeps the world ticking.
For a large enterprise to use APIs, there is a bit of infrastructure you'll need. And that's really the biggest difference, to go back to your original question about large versus small, that we see is most of what a large organization needs for APIs is actually internal, is grabbing their internal data and transforming themselves internally, which are massive projects sometimes for consulting firms. So really you need to be able to interface with external APIs, and one of the questions was about API management platforms. So you need some bit of infrastructure as a big organization to use APIs, which is why platforms like ours or others that are more product oriented, we rely on some bank as a service, brokerage as a service, some back office, open banking, that needs to be done first. Before we actually, a lot of clients want to start building products and doing all these innovative things, but they don't even know where their customers live, or their name is different in one database versus another database. How can you use API if you have that problem? So that's really the biggest issue we see, is you need to do some data management, data warehousing, data piping first to be able to use APIs, and most organizations don't realize that. And obviously if you're a startup, it's much easier. You use it right out of the box, and you can deploy really quickly.
But I think it's helping big organizations, isn't it? Because they'll come to you and they'll go, how do we do this? Or they'll come to cloud providers and suddenly change their infrastructure from legacy infrastructure onto a hybrid cloud system. So actually it's pulling these companies into the sort of kind of place that they should be. So I see it as, again, as an enabler, as an assistant.
You probably don't know, at Oracle, we're actually a partner of Oracle's in the US. They have a open banking API platform, and we're one of the providers. So it's an example of a hybrid model where they're doing a lot of the infrastructure, replatforming and database cloud stuff, and then we're sliding ourselves in with all the calculators and simulators and all of the more fintech-oriented parts of the platform. So there's a lot of ways companies can play together too. You don't need to go to one API provider. You could go to a dozen, or you could go to a platform provider who will farm it out to all of the different services. So it's a very, very interesting, but also very complicated field. It's starting to be,
I think regulation has a big role to play. Okay, and I think in the white paper of the Open Insurance Initiative, we call for smarter regulation. Okay, which calls for more flexibility on the part of regulators, because usually insurtech and fintech startups face very high entry barriers. Okay, and insurance have been for so long protected by these barriers. I think the major hurdle is usually internal within the companies. There's usually resistance to change, especially when you're calling for open APIs and sharing of data. Most companies are protective of their data. So I think cultural resistance to change is a big issue and something that senior executives have to come up with ways to introduce these new innovations, okay, without fear of the new startups that are entering the market.
So because the two examples often people cite is like Stripe, you know, like 10 years, $22.5 billion valuation. Banks were not ready to see an API company taking over such large part of the market, right? But it's not only about fintech. On the telco side, Twilio is one example, doing SMS and voice and communication. Now they were $14.5 billion on the New York Stock Exchange. Again, less than 10 years, disrupting many telco players, right? So in the insurance market, now insurers know the Open Insurance Initiative. Yeah. Now they're aware of what APIs can bring. Do you think there will be a Stripe of insurance? Or no, insurers are ready to open APIs and contribute to avoid that?
It's very hard to predict what will happen in the future, whether there will be a Stripe of the insurers or companies the size of Ping An in China, which is a major insurance platform. But I think it's not going to be, open insurance is not going to be something that customers ask for. They will not ask for open insurance or open banking. You cannot go and buy open insurance. Okay, but it's rather the experience that the customer will enjoy in the future, which will be basically an aggregation of APIs, service components that the customer can access without even thinking about getting insurance. It will be a seamless experience, less friction. There will be accelerated underwriting processes. We believe that in the future, insurance will be transacted in milliseconds rather than in weeks, days, or even minutes. And claim payments will also be done at very high speeds.
One question
I totally agree with this.
About open insurance, though. So I guess with banking, you've got a steady stream of transaction data on which you can see or use. In insurance, we tend to interact with our insurer once a year. Yeah. What sort of data, where do you see the advantage? Because I do think you're right, and I see there's opportunity, but I just wonder, like, the data sets seem to be more limited.
The data set will look very different to what is today. For instance, with the development of autonomous vehicles, for instance.
Right. Yes.
Now, autonomous vehicles will come equipped with a rich package of sensors, you know, radar, LiDAR, multiple cameras, real-time mapping. This equipment will provide so much information, so much data, and it will be real-time data anytime, anywhere, all day. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the extent of the data that insurers will harvest out of this equipment will increase significantly.
So fleet operators?
Fleet operators and individual vehicles, not only fleet operators. I mean, we're heading towards a future of autonomous vehicles. Yes. Autonomous vehicles, you don't have a steering wheel, you don't have pedals. The AI drives the car, okay? And we see opportunities there for insurers to gain insights out of the data that will be generated. And we're only talking about vehicles here. And in the future, you will have smart homes, mm-hmm. and you will have smart cities. Everything will in our lives will become connected online. We'll be using Internet of Things devices extensively. Okay, so the range of data that the insurers will access and transact will increase significantly. It will be quite different to what we have today.
Actually, more data almost in that case. Yeah.
Exactly, significantly a huge amount of data, and this could provide opportunities for insurers, could provide opportunities for cloud storage services, because that data would have to be stored somewhere. And
Yeah, you guys will be happy.
Exactly, exactly. There will be opportunities for data analytic companies, the analytics as a service. Insurance will probably become insurance as a service also.
My wearable, I'm going to connect, aren't I, when I walk around? All
Exactly.
This,
I mean, your watch
have
could in
one,
the
but
future could in the future come with the insurance already included
for health
in it as a module.
And this is why, this is why
which-
API management also will be part of insurance.
Your watch will probably connect itself to your insurer and provide him with information on your lifestyle and what things that you're doing throughout the day. And they could also use that information to produce new products, more personalization.
So Omer and Burak, also we want your advice on this.
Please,
maybe
Omer, go first.
you want to talk a little bit about like because with Intertech you are also enabling ecosystems, right? That's also an opportunity, right? So can you tell us more a little bit about it?
I think on the opportunity side, we were talking about the smallest or the largest company. I believe the smallest will win. Because as we talked, the culture is a much more important thing. Because the startups start from scratch, everything is clear, everything is simple, and they focus on one target, and they do it much more convenient and much more value added. I believe this is my personal opinion. And as Intertech, what we are trying to do, we are, especially as I told that we are big. We are more than 1,000 people. We have more than 100 products and banking software product. And so what we are trying to do is to enable these fintechs to make their products and services to enable from the idea to the innovation immediately. So within this context, it's a big opportunity for us as well, because when we look at the companies like us and like Oracle or like big one, in order to make them change or make them their shift, it's not an easy task. The change management is not easy task. So when you make you flexible and agile, and also enable your ecosystem and partner, then this makes you also a value-added service, because you, for your customers, you add value for the banks, because you enable the fintechs and they try to spread out to all the portals, the sites, the P2P networks or others, to make their banks available. And also you enable the people to access the banks immediately. So I think it's a good opportunity, but the challenges, as I heard from you, is the regulation, the paperwork. Paperwork is not an easy stuff. You need to make you ready for the regulations, like the GDPR. We are talking about the data and how much data will we exchange with the fintechs and the banks and the like Intertech companies, like running API portal and doing API management between the fintechs and the banks. So I think the opportunity is bigger than the challenges, but the startups is much more lucky, I can say.
Is it broken?
Yeah, it's broken.
Oh, sorry. This is always the question, right? You say, oh, broken or not? I'm really sorry. I hope you have insurance for the phone, right?
Well,
no, you cannot help on insurance on the phone.
Yeah, issues covered.
So after this, can you share a little bit also so for Omer and also for Michael, and you know, it's maybe the advantage of the small, right? Because they're a small player and you think it's a small player. Oracle, you also work with big players, right? Like Fouad, you work with big players in insurance. How it could be a strength for big players, right?
Yeah, I would like to talk about the problems of both big players and the small players. I mean, small players are fintechs, are part of our ecosystem. We are seeing their challenges. On the other side, we are serving our customers. They are big players, and we are seeing their transformation as well. For example, we have been talking on insurance, And there's no regulation for insurance industry to drive, for example, open insurance, like PSD2. But like companies like Allianz is doing something really different. For example, Allianz is one of our clients. For example, what could be the biggest asset, critical asset for an insurance company from the information technology perspective? Core insurance package. Core insurance package. Every company is founding their core insurance package on their own with their IT organization because it's competitive part, strategic part for themselves. And Allianz is opening up their core insurance package to community like open software, open software. Yeah, I mean, so it's interesting. But what is the value behind this? Okay, you are opening your core asset, but how would you gain money? How would you get in front of the competition? They are putting a layer on top of this open software, open stack, a country layer, putting some policies, country-wise regulations, and they are delivering the software package to the third parties, for example. That is the business model, new kind of business model for delivering their IT assets to community and the third parties. It's a very innovative business model for Allianz transformation, and we are part of this story as well. We are enabling with providing some technologies, but it's a great example to exploring new kind of business models in this new era. On the other side, what could be the main problem for the fintechs? I think not regulation. They are not tackling with regulation. They are not considering that part. Their biggest problem is standardization, I guess. They are building their solution and they are going to market, and they are facing a company and bank, for example, asking to deploy their solution with different standardization for that bank. They are going to another bank and they are asked with another development. But they have very limited breadth, so there should be some standardization, maybe a layer, maybe a platform like
Well, there is some
Fintech.
standardization on open banking.
There should be standardization.
There is.
I disagree about the regulation for startups. If you think about the difference between Stripe, who's a $20 billion company, but anyone on earth realistically can start an e-commerce business. There's really no regulation around selling a t-shirt online, and you could integrate Stripe and boom, you can make $1,000 selling t-shirts. It's not the same starting an insurance app. If you want to start an insurance app in Thailand, it really restricts entrepreneurship in regulation, and a lot of these companies are government-owned or they're highly regulated or controlled by governments, and it's just hard to break in. So it's hard for there to be a Stripe of insurtech or banking tech and things like this, because no matter how much we want it to be the case, you can't make 1 billion insurtech apps. I would love that to be the case where anyone could do P2P insurance, just lend people money, but governments globally will squash those businesses. So that's really the biggest difference I see in a lot of the legacy companies, and that's probably the case here in Turkey as well, have a huge advantage. But again, their problem is more internal. They're fighting themselves. They're not really fighting startups. And I think it's a misconception that opening up data and like Allianz and BBVA in Spain have this as well, is going to allow all these fintechs to get started. It's not really the case. Fintechs will start new businesses. They'll have new business lines, new products, new innovations. They're not going to really take over core business lines of some of these businesses.
But don't you think some players will just deliver an API to abstract the regulation, like license as a service, or like authorization as a service?
I think we are already seeing this in insurance. I mean, you made a very good point in that insurers are used to building everything themselves. Okay, this will not be the case in the future. They will rely on third parties to provide insurance as a service, okay, certain new products that they don't yet have, but other third parties could develop these products and make them available through the insurance platform, through APIs. We're seeing this already done now, okay, with companies like Baloise in Switzerland. They've cooperated with an insurtech firm to create a new product, a cybersecurity product. The product was created within 2 or 3 weeks and was ready to launch on Baloise's own platform. So speed and agility is part of the game in the future. not only in product delivery to the customer, but also in product development, piloting, testing, etc. So speed and higher service quality will be a key thing in the future.
Yeah. And Will, about the open banking in UK, right?
Right.
What was, let's say, the trend that you've seen in opportunities because of the regulation happening, and how did you embrace that?
Well, there's loads of trends, and I think... Sorry, I've got to correct you on this. There is standardization in open banking. There is an entire organization devoted to the open banking standard. I think what you're saying, though, I agree. If you look at PSD2 in Europe, you've got the Berlin group, you've got the Ozone group. There are, of course, different core systems doing different things. And I think it's what we're saying. We've written a domain-specific language, or rather I haven't, the amazing tech people in our company have, that allows to standardize or at least make a square hole around one and deal with that. And I think that is a problem. But open banking is started to happen in insurance already, so I appreciate the open insurance initiative is great, but you've got companies like Anorak that are doing life insurance based on banking data. At the moment, there is so much opportunity because we've suddenly got a new feed of data which wasn't available to us, which of course is the current account or the banking transactions, that really the kind of sky's the limit. The most interesting thing we're doing is actually not even related to banking. I can't tell you what it is, but it's kind of cool. Yeah. And so I think, you know, and obviously you're right, Mike, about regulation and a bit, you know, potentially that is a sign. But I think people, remember that we're always building technology by and large for people, certainly at the consumer end. So it's the regulation tends to give a veneer of trust. Not all the time. There have been loads of companies that have been regulated that have been effectively stealing or doing bad things, whatever. But we've always got to remember who the customer is, and if it is a B2C model, and a lot of companies in the UK are looking at B2C, we're not, but there are lots of companies doing that. Then we've got to get people on board. The entire phrase open banking is a massive paradox. Why would you want your bank open? It's mental. You wouldn't want to do that. So at the moment, I think there are only 25% of the UK population are even aware of open banking. And the banks who are basically funding the open banking implementation entity that does the standardization, you've got the poachers, as I mentioned, game reserve, and so they say that they don't want people to know about open banking until it's ready, until it's actually ready. So I think what they're really doing is that they are everyone's scrambling to monetize open banking. So I can do an open banking payment. I can effectively miss out the acquirer. I can miss out the card scheme, so Visa are going, and then I can go straight to the insurer bank, the issuer bank, just in a heartbeat. So coming back to Stripe and e-commerce and stuff, that's massive because you've got 0.6% of a transaction fee suddenly removed. So that, I mean, they say open banking is the biggest thing to happen to banking and financial services since the invention of the cash point, the ATM. In 1967 in Enfield, North London, a bit of history. I'm not sure if that's necessarily true, but it is certainly an opportunity, and I think the biggest challenge right now is telling people about it. We all kind of know about it because we're in that sort of world, but a lot of people have no idea it exists. And then larger organizations finding the right way to not see a massive hole in their balance sheets, because let's face it, we can't have banks just going out of business. It would be catastrophic for nations. So we do have to be sensible and have conversations with banks, with larger organizations as fintechs about how we go forward in a positive, constructive way. And I think coming back to my original point about knowing a specific customer base, that's how banks can become potentially more like utility companies. So they're providing a suite of services that a front end would then deliver to the clients they know best, which allows them to stay in business and arguably is a more sustainable model going forward.
So one point is, some people say that banks were branch first, and then it was a website first, then a mobile first, and now it will be cloud first or API first, right? Maybe a question for Omer here. With the Intertech API, what's different about delivering an API instead of like a classic mobile application or website or a branch user experience? What's different?
The difference is democratizing the customers. Because when you provide the applications, the banks, the customer of the Intertech, thinks that they are stick to Intertech, and they cannot feel safe empty. And so also the delivery depends on the Intertech performance. But right now, by this API platform, we are democratizing our customers. So the APIs are over there, the use cases are over there, the simple source codes are over there. So any customer, any fintech can immediately run through that API portal, and if they have an idea, they can immediately implement a solution and launch immediately. Even there is no need for Intertech interference. So the difference is that giving this empowerment to customers, the fintechs, are making us very open to the world. And because we believe in the platforms. Maybe 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you can be a strong player and you can be the only one in the market. But right now, it's not a strong players market, it's a platform players market. Even you can look at the Apple, you can say that, okay, Apple is a strong player, only single. But when you look at their application market, then the App Store, you can see thousands and fintechs or thousands of the companies, partners developing software on top of that, and making Apple much more stronger. So that's why we believe in this API platform. So that's why we are also developing the mobile application. We are all developing the digital platforms, but on top of that, or beside that, giving them the ability believe that it makes much more stronger than developing the product itself. Because within the future, I believe that we are always reading from the books and listening from this panel and from the gurus that the banking will be needed, but the banks will not be needed anymore. So we need to keep in mind, as always, the banking will always be needed. The financing, lending, money transfer, P2P payment, distributed ledger, we are talking about that. But the banks physically will be needed, is a question mark. So that in this world, nobody can say that, okay, I will be this, only one strong player without any solution or integrity. It's not.
So I could add a quick point on that in mobile. So I think the problem with core banking and open banking and these initiatives, it assumes you have banks. And in much of the world, it's unbanked or underbanked. Yeah. A lot of our potential customers are in Southeast Asia, Latin America. They don't have access to banking. Their phone is their bank. Mm-hmm. And that's why you see so many, like Tencent's, Alibaba's, the world get into banking services, payment services. So that's where we see the most opportunity, especially on the blockchain side. If you're assuming that 10 years from now, people store their money on their phone, and that money might not be fiat currency, it might be digital currency, you need to think about building API connections there as well. So that's really what we're trying to do, is get ahead of that, 3 to 5 years ahead, and think, well, what are the services, what are the layers, the platforms you need? And that's what Stripe did a really good job. It's one of my favorite companies, and they did a really good job. They were 5 years ahead of the market of putting all of that together and enabling mobile payments. So now we have to try to think of how do we enable, digital currency payments and transactions, assuming that 1 billion people won't have bank accounts, but they'll have thousands of dollars to spend, and we need to be able to connect all of that. And the company who does that is going to be the next 10 or $20 billion company, I think.
So if we enter in the wrap-up phase, maybe we can make a last turn, but on the other side. So we begin this way, we will go the other way. about what will be you all will be wrong, right? But what will be, to your mind, the shape of the fintech industry like in 10 years, right? What's the trend do you see, and what change it will enable? So you have the big responsibility to begin first in that.
Okay, that's a big question to me, and I would like to go from the point where Mike just stands. The Tencent and WeChat, like Facebook, the big giants are entering into this market. We need to understand their role in future as well, because they will be part of this market as well. They will be player in this market as well, and but they are focusing on not the operation side, back-end side of the banking. They are not focusing on that part. They are focusing on the customer-facing side. So, according to me, there will be 3 layers in the financial service industry. First one, and there will be some players in these layers. The first one is the infrastructure layer. This part will be consisted of the players just focusing on the operational side of banking, and their core strength will be the efficiency with the volume, I mean.
Like AWS for banking, kind of.
Maybe the banks, maybe Wells Fargo, the biggest banking corporations, I mean, that kind of. But because Amazon.com is just standing in my second layer, this is platform layer, these guys are playing data game, and their main focus is not just finance industry. Their main focus is in data game, and they know very well the customer, and they are very good at managing the ecosystem. And the third layer will be the value layer. Value layer will be consisted of the niche players developing some banking solutions with seamless customer experience, I mean. Their core strength will be the customer experience in these niche areas. And this is my imagination for the financial services industry.
Yeah. Thank you, Fouad. I know that you also think that shared ledger, distributed ledger, replicated ledger, blockchains could be also a big game changer in the insurance industry.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to say that innovation will mean that all insurance companies will become insurtech companies, okay? Because digitization of all their processes will happen, okay? So they will not be any different from insurtech companies that we know today. Blockchain, I think, has a big future in insurance. We still have to see use cases that could have really big commercial impact. Right now, we have parametric insurance products, which include travel insurance and maybe crop insurance. But we see other areas of use for blockchain, for instance, sharing data. Insurers could protect their data by creating digital property rights and placing this information on blockchain. Okay, will protect and give them control of that data. It will also give them the incentive to share the data and probably monetize some of the data that they have to others. That's basically it.
Yeah, thank you very much. Michael?
So quickly, I think the big thing in the future will be Fintech and APIs will allow firms to go down market and target smaller companies in the future. Yeah, so they'll be able to target smaller consumers. So microtransactions, micropayments, you're already starting to see this. That's really going to be the trend. Is most of our clients still want to target the high net worth and their traditional customer base. So we say, no, you should use our cloud or Oracle's cloud and infrastructure to target the person who has $5 to invest or has a bicycle to insure. Why can't they insure a bicycle? Mm-hmm. So that's really the future, I see. And the companies that push that forward are going to have massive scale, and we hope to help them to do that.
The best way to predict the future is to invent it, right?
That's right.
Omer, you want to share something?
I think we need to look at from two perspectives. One, the corporate, the other consumer, when we talk about the financial services. From the corporate part, the most challenging is the blockchain technology, I believe. Apart from the digital currencies, for the blockchain, like the trade finance. I think when we look at the corporate part, the much more the biggest one is the corporate lending, and also the trade finance, the international transfer, and the trading between the corporates. So when I look at back, I see it's not progressing like the consumer. It's much more slower than the others. And there are like the players like the SWIFT. These players will not let the banks to give them to other fintechs and etc. But with the blockchain kind of consortiums, I think that there will be much more progress on, let's say, the consumer and not the corporate. On the consumer side, I say that I have a question mark. Will be the bank exist for the consumers? Yes, needed maybe like the operation part. At the moment, we were in Berlin 3 weeks ago, Berlin, the Fintech point for Germany. We were talking about the Solaris Bank case, and the Solaris Bank is white labeling, and even a Turkish bank has a mobile application running the Solaris Bank services. So the operation part even today is in place, but right now the names will change. We are talking about the Apple Card, Apple Pay, Google Pay. So in terms of payment, there are networks. For lending, we are talking about the P2P lending, micro lending, etc. But in the upcoming 10 years, I can say that the banks will be exiting from the consumer, and will be the maybe they will act like the private funding partners for these banking services.
And last but not least, Will.
Okay, so I'm not sure that much will happen in 10 years. I think if you've seen really the history of sort of banking technology, I think Burak's point is correct. Like, at an infrastructure level, I think there'll be a lot more efficiency. So banks will start to move on to, thank God, cloud and hybrid cloud and that sort of thing. That will take time. I think machine learning, so real quality data sets are just about coming through. They're still not really there, but that's going to be really interesting. But it will take time to train the models. I think consumers will see a lot more instantaneous things. So I want a bank account in 30 seconds. I want insurance now as I buy the car. I think that at the consumer end, but I think we're still 20, 25 years from real change. You know, crypto is a very interesting world, but compared to gold reserves, I think there are only a few $100 billion of crypto, where there's $7.2 trillion worth of gold in existence. Like that, there are sort of seismic shifts that have to happen in consumer behavior, I think, to see a massive revolution. But I think under the hood, I think that's where the magic will start to happen. You know, hydrogen, these kind of like really interesting platforms delivering the ability for those companies to then innovate. So I think it's an exciting time, but whether we'll see a seismic shift in 10 years, I'm not so sure. I'd love there to be, obviously.
So let's meet in 10 years, right?
Yeah.
We have the video.
Yeah.
Just one thing before we finally wrap up. In 45 minutes at 5:30, there will be a photo with everybody who wants to be taken in photo, right? All the attendees, right? In main room, right? So that's it. And the second thing is at 6:15. For the people who wants to go on the boat tour, right, 6:15 we will meet to the sign in front of the parking lot, right, the Fintech Festival, Istanbul Fintech Festival sign, so to go on the boat all together. Thank you very much for a great discussion. Thank you for the panel. We can applause the panel for their insights. Thank you. And if you want to engage with them, it's the time, right? See you later.